Welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by Caliber Mind. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I am joined once again by Justin Norris. Justin, welcome to the show.
It's great to be back. Nice to chat with you, Camela.
Tell me a little bit about where you are right now and what you're doing. I hear you have your own podcast.
Yeah, so my day job, I work for a company called 360 Learning. I am the director of marketing operations, so leading the marketing ops team, and my team also supports BDR ops, so effectively a RevOps or RevOps-ish role, which is a great company, great place to be. I'm having a lot of fun there. In my copious spare time, I host a podcast called RevOps FM, which I've been doing for about 8 or 9 months. Started it last fall. And yeah, that's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, as you know, but have been able to have a lot of really great chats with people, learning a lot, and getting some good feedback on that too.
I always get really excited when operations folks get a peek into how a different department is functioning because you always learn at least one thing about how people think, if nothing else. Before we get into our topic of the day, is anything popping up where you're like, wow, that's why they ask for that?
I guess there's two things. I mean, with ho hosting a podcast, like you really understand content operations and everything that goes into it. Like you have to record, and then you have to get it edited, and then you have to put it up on the audio and then up on the video and then cut a clip and then do the show notes and then do the promo post. Like it's on and on and on, and you just don't expect that when you get started. So to all the content people out there that are fighting the good fight, I salute you. And then I mean, I've learned so much. The other thing, and I don't know if this is pleasing or annoying to my listeners. I presume the ones that stick around also enjoy this journey, but I have a very expansive view of RevOps. So it's kind of like anyone in any go-to-market function in any way, because and sometimes a little outside that too, because my view is like in revenue operations, you're responsible for the overall health and effectiveness of the go-to-market functions. And so you need to understand what great looks like in every area. So, I speak to sales leaders, sales individual contributors, marketing, CS, some product people. And that's what keeps it interesting for me, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So I've nothing one thing, but I have just learned a ton about all those different areas.
Yeah, I think, well, it sounds like I'm not the only person who's drawn to revenue operations because the only constant is change.
Hmm.
And then it's also this weird balance of systems, process, and human behavior. And you have to get and know and care about all of those pieces. You can't just get totally sucked into a systems point. But I'm really glad we talked about this because I think it's going to influence our conversation a bit on what marketing metrics should look like for an organization and knowing what the other departments and particularly what your CEO and CFO care the most about, like what's the thing they're driving the business toward, really should inform how you're thinking about board reporting, reporting to the executive review, and then QBRs, and then rolling down from there. So let's talk a little bit about um, those different audiences and how we should think about the level of detail, because this is something I've gotten hung up on early in my career for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. And the timing is funny because my boss, I report into our VP of marketing. She's actually on maternity leave right now. I've been sitting into our revenue executive meetings in her place, kind of doing the marketing report out to our COO, our CRO, our CEO. Like it's kind of all a revenue focused executive meeting, let's say, with all the sales leaders. And you really see the sorts of things that they care about and are interested in versus like internally in marketing, what we care about and are interested in. So I've gone through enough iterations now that able to kind of have a tight story and a tight set of metrics. But yeah, it's super high level. It's super like what actually impacts revenue. So really just focus on pipeline by each of our markets. If there's issues, if things are good, you'll get a few pats on the back type of thing. But it's really the issues that people care about. So just having a tight story around that and having I would say as few KPIs as realistically possible. Um, that has been what's worked well for me.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I kind of had the same epiphany when I walked into a boardroom and was like, okay, so now I understand why I was getting all of the questions I was getting, and I would have answered them so differently had I known. um, but I really like your point about as few KPIs as possible at that level, and that they really care. I always say it's results first, then it's why it happened and what you're going to do differently to do better, and that's all they care about.
That's
So,
that. No, that's perfect. I wish I'd said that because that is the perfect summarization, I think, of where you need to go.
but let's talk about a few of the KPIs that you would include beyond pipeline at that
Yes.
level.
So honestly, pipe is the main one, and then we also talk a lot about hand raisers because so the way I think of it for the C-suite, you need like some top of funnel metric, pipe, and then revenue. Marketing isn't necessarily the one that talks about revenue. And then for each of those, target to pace, because that's very much like where are we? Are we on track? If we're not on track, like you said, what are we doing to get on track? For us, the top of funnel metric we really look at is hand raisers, which I think is probably the healthiest one that we have right now. By hand raiser, I mean, demo request, contact request, someone that's come to us and saying, I'd like to talk to somebody about potentially buying something. And that is, in my opinion, the most meaningful one that we have right now. More so than leads, which could be anything. Some of them converted at 0.5%, some of them converted at 40%, more than MQLs, which can be a really problematic concept. So it's the closest leading indicator to actual value. But this is where I find it can get squishy too, depending on like what sort of motion you're running and what people are expecting to see. But really, that is what we focus on: hand raisers, pipe, by channel, target to pace, and that is the story that people want to hear.
Yay. Because what I see too often, and I've consulted with a lot of different companies as you have in the past, a lot of marketing leaders, at least in the past, maybe we're getting better about this, don't keep a really close eye on what's happening on the sales side of the house, meaning pipeline and bookings. So, um, the best skill I think any analyst can have is really pattern matching and recognizing when you're ahead or behind pace, and recognizing that pipeline's behind early in the quarter so you can actually do something tangible to impact that number. Have you seen this shift in focusing more on pipeline change any behavior on the marketing team itself?
I came into a pretty rigorous org in the first place. There's a lot of management consultant DNA, like McKinsey like DNA in our company. The CMO when I started was former head of operations. So a lot of that rigor was built out where we have our KPIs, we look at them, and I think we've continued to increase the discipline there. So the one nice thing I can see from reporting out on these problems every week, like if X channel is behind this week, like we're going to respond to it on a week by week basis. Not everything is that responsive as like SEM where you can turn a dial and dial it up. And if organic's behind, there's not a ton that you're going to do by next week. But having that scrutiny, having that focus and monitoring it week to week, I think um, turns maybe minor setbacks into victories and turns what could be major setbacks into minor recoverable setbacks. So you really do yourself a lot of favor by having that sort of scrutiny. And we have a great dashboard in Looker that our data team built for us as well that will break down by every market, and then it'll break down the plan by channel, what we're expecting to get to. And then the key innovation is just being able to toggle it between showing our achievement percentage to like the total periods achievement, whether that's month or quarter, to achievement percentage by pace. So it'll look at business days in the month, deduct, holidays, it pings an API and gets the holidays and stuff like that for that region. And then we'll say that you should be at 60% right now. You are at 60%, therefore you're at 100% of your pace. And that's really useful because in the past it was like, all right, we're behind. You're doing all this back of the envelope math to try to figure out like where are we behind and why and dig down. And it just surfaces those insights for you so that you can be more reactive.
So perhaps instead we compare to nameless companies we've both seen as a pretty stark contrast to maybe almost the norm we see versus what you're describing, which is really advanced and impressive.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of unaccountability out there. I wonder if it's changing. Like I haven't been in consulting since the economic reset, and I do wonder if companies are applying more scrutiny now that their budgets are being cut, now that they can't just have a CAC of anything,
Yeah.
that nobody cares. I think at least the voices that I'm hearing and listening to, it feels like the narrative around this is shifting and like it's cool to be fiscally responsible again. So I do wonder. I don't know what you're seeing out there in the market.
Not really.
Really?
Um, so I think more and more people are realizing that they don't have what they need. Not everybody realizes what that needs to look like. So I think this is a really useful conversation and speaking to if you have all the metrics you just described, what are the kind of research drills you can do to figure out what exactly is off and needs to be adjusted? Maybe that's a better spot to start. If we're in month one of the quarter, middle of month one, and we notice we're behind on pipeline generation, what are some of the diagnostics you recommend to figure out why that's happening or what you can do to turn it around?
Yeah. So I guess number one, it comes back to your plan. We break down our pipe plan by channel based on the first touch, which isn't perfect, but you sort of have to pick a lane when it comes to that. And so, if you have 100 opportunities for the quarter or the month or whatever, just for the sake of round numbers, it's a made up number. You have so much for SEM, so much for channel two, so much for channel three, and so on. So number one, the first drill is like well, I guess the first drill would be by market. We have multiple markets, but each of the markets have their own leads. So in my head, I'm already down at the market level. And then the next drill would be by channel. So like which of our channels is behind. Once you identify that, it's really working its way back through the funnel. So like if we're behind on SEM, all right, we're behind on SQLs. How many hand raisers have we gotten? Like, is it conversion rate from hand raiser to SQL, or do we have a low volume of hand raisers? And if it's a low volume, it's like, well, how many people are visiting the site? Like, are they not converting on the web page? Then you go back to like, how many clicks are we getting? And you can take that back in that particular channel all the way back to impression share. And is our bid strategy off? And I mean, it goes down into all sorts of arcane pay-per-click lore that is, not something I've really looked at closely for 15 years now, but we have the people that do that. And so within that channel, that's probably has the most highly observable channel and the most controllable channel, and it's the easiest to work with. Compare that to like our organic search is down, which is a lot more of a um, lagging metric versus the inputs that you put into it to achieve it. It can reflect many things. It can reflect brand strength. It can reflect your activity on social media. It can reflect PR. It can reflect you just had a big showing at a conference. You hosted an event. It's a convenience for people that can't be bothered to type your URL into the browser. So that's a harder one, but you have to kind of have a heuristic. And for most of our channels, we have sort of a decision tree of like, if this is off, go here, then go here, then go here, then go here. Not all of them can you correct as much in real time, but at least we can try to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. And your point about organic and search, it could be an algorithm change on Google's part. Like they de indexed a ton of pages back in February, and we're still figuring out why that is and how to get it corrected. So there's a lot of things out of marketing's control. I think what we're maybe not explicitly stating is that in order to get to this place, you really have to nail the basics and have your campaign data organized in a very specific way. So I would love to talk to you and get into the MQL versus hand raise. I think I know why you're doing that,
Yeah.
but let's get into it a little bit.
Yeah. We have a legacy MQL definition that frankly is different than anything I've seen before. Like the conventional like marketing automation definition of an MQL, it's kind of like a combination of you're the right person and it's the right time based on like a lead score. Sometimes a hand raise would be like an auto MQL. And for us, the way that we've used it is just we kind of assess you when you come into the system. We use Sixth Sense today, so we run some, Sixth Sense magic in the background, and we say, okay, great, you're an MQL or you're not. So I guess it's almost entirely firmographic and demographic in
Mm.
that way. Um, and I don't love it. I don't love the way that we do it today, but it's baked into so many things. And I guess this is one of the things that I've really learned as an aside, going from consulting um, to being in house. When you're in consulting, it's very easy to be up on your high horse and be like, this is the right way, and these are the best practices, and et cetera. And then you're actually responsible for the change management and the rollout and the like, what does it actually mean in terms of work to change these things? You're like, you know what, that's fine. I'm okay with that, like that, that patch on the roof. It's not leaking right now. I'm just going to leave that there for now, and I'm going to focus on something. And you just have to make decisions in that way. So in any event, that is what it means. And I'm not saying it's meaningless, but for us, one of the main things when I started that we adopted was really focusing in on hand raisers, splitting them out and understanding that the level of intent there is really significantly different than like somebody that downloads an ebook or by several orders of magnitude, and that is the best predictor of our pipeline health. So that's why we focus on that.
It's so interesting because I've been an advocate of not relying on lead scoring to determine what sales is following up on for a long time. And it's kind of sacrilege in the marketing operations community because we have this concept of level of engagement and firmographic fit. But my argument's always been what we have in our marketing automation platform should capture the universe of marketing touches so far as it's reasonable. Like you get into website interactions, it gets too prolific. But once we start moving that data over to the CRM side of the house, assuming you have two different tools, or what we raise up to the sales team if you don't have two different tools, it it needs to change into the total universe and getting credit for each touch to what are we communicating to sales? What do they need to know about the most? And what's the most effective path for them to convert an opportunity? And to me, that has always been working closely with the sales team and being able to look at campaign hand raises by channel and looking at conversion rates to determine, is this really a hand raise or should we be routing it to nurture? Is there a different path you would take there, or are you seeing that this is kind of working for your organization? Just curious, because I agree
Yeah.
there needs to be a fit component, but
Yeah. So I mean, a bit of even more additional context there in terms of like our structure today. It's very BDR focused. So we have a strong BDR org, and I spend a lot of my time there. I joke like for the first 2 years here, I felt like I really spent way more time with the BDRs than I did with the marketing team. Um, and just because there's a lot of stuff to put in place, a lot of different things to improve upon. So they're responsible for that qualification layer before it gets to sales. The sales team are really getting opportunities that are closed, and there's pros and cons to that.
mm,
One of the pros is you're really preserving your sales team's time. One of the cons is that I think it makes the sales team very focused on closing and on like less hungry, you can say, to be doing some of that cold outreach, to be doing some of that nurturing, maybe a bit more transactional. Not referring to anyone in particular at our org, just as a general thought. Um, so the BDRs are responsible for doing that qualification layer, and we didn't have a lot of nurturing. Like we have newsletters, and we're still sort of figuring that out. Like we think we should be doing more nurturing, but like the typical playbook of like we'll have a tofu and a bofu and a mofu, and then we'll split it up by funnel, and we'll just be dripping people ebooks. I don't think it works anymore. I don't think it's that engaging. I have companies that have like they've probably sent me 50 ebooks now. I haven't read them. Um, So we're still figuring that out and kind of evolving that and refocusing our BDR time. So increasingly trying to focus them and prioritize their time and figure out where. So my latest thinking on it is honestly something I'm just thinking about right now in terms of nurture is like not having to have it be either or. Like a BDR can reach out and we have that criteria, and then we'll do some marketing things, and we don't need to like coordinate it so tightly and keep those swim lanes so separate because they're different and they can overlap. And with the email marketing, our team is really leaning into kind of thought leadership. And the way I think about it is it's sort of like the substackification of nurture, where people will even pay. Like think about it, people pay to receive those emails because they're from a trusted voice. They really believe in that person's expertise and what they have to say. We're really fortunate to have an evangelist like that on our team who has an excellent reputation within the community that we sell to. So let's lean into that. And that's kind of the path that we're going on now.
It's so interesting because as a content marketer, I might be a little biased, but that's something I've seen work over and over again. And one of the things that makes smaller company founders hesitant to do that is, what if they leave? And then it's just fascinating to me. But we're getting a little bit off topic. My fault. I tend to squirrel a lot. Um, so just want to be really clear here that I think I'm going to speak for myself and then I'll let you chime in. But I want to emphasize that the measurements that marketing teams are looking at today aren't wrong. And there are a lot of measurements that the individual practitioners need to know, like impressions, cost per lead, all of that good stuff. I think what I would really emphasize here is that at the executive level, you need to understand what the business cares about. And even though you know all of those other things are super critical, it's ultimately about, are we profitable and are we growing? Is there anything you would add to that to kind of clarify the different audience, different functionality
No, I
piece?
mean, yeah, like it's uh it's a different story for different levels, just like you said. So the C-suite, we've talked about it. For marketing leadership, when we meet with myself and our boss and the other marketing directors, we go maybe one level deeper and we're looking at some of the more channel specific leading metrics. Certainly, if we're troubleshooting something, we're going way deeper. If we have alignment meetings with ops and our BDR coaches and um, our demand gen leads in each market. And there we look at a different set of meetings, around our a different set of KPIs rather around meetings and SLAs and that sort of thing. So in large part, it depends on like what is relevant to you to help you, run your part of the business. And for sales, it's more like, yeah, if I'm a CRO, I just want to know like, is the pipe coming? Is the train on time there? Am I going to be fine? That's one level. If you're meeting with your BDR coaches, they're really concerned about like, am I going to be getting enough lead flow? Is that lead quality good? And the demand gen is like, are you reaching out to them quickly enough? Are you, these leads that I'm investing in, are you responding to them? Are they sitting and kind of spoiling on the vine? So it's very contextual in that way. And then all the way down to like, like we alluded to with those SEM metrics about impression share and stuff like that. Um, and with operations people, they tend to like to get really granular, and we really have a culture of like challenging each other, and where ops is expected is one of the things I really like is we're not in this more service oriented posture, but we're really expected to come in and be like, hey, like we're down on SEM, like why is that? And like go with them on that journey, not from a like, naughty boys and girls kind of vibe, but more to help them understand, to be knowledgeable. So that's really great. And I think as an individual practitioner with who owns a channel, you're going to want to go as deep as you need to. But yeah, the heuristic for me is like, what do you need to know to drive your part of the business? What's relevant? Too much kind of data puking. I forget the fellow, Avinash Kaushik, analytics dude who's been around for a while, has a somewhat gruesome phrase, but it kind of works, right? Like too much, and it's like I can't absorb that. I'm an English major. I like to joke like I actually don't readily absorb numbers and stats. Like it takes effort from me. So this is maybe also why I'm more focused on story and like what is the story that these things are telling.
That's actually such a good thing, I think, for an analyst to kind of know about themselves because I'm very data literate and pattern matching is just second nature. So I would put up these big charts and expect everybody to see what I saw at the beginning of my career. And it was embarrassing. I mean, I look back on it and I'm like, oh, it's all about the story. I'm sorry. Whoops.
But yeah,
Um,
I think for anyone that is, I mean, there are those people who can look at a huge chart and just grow like, oh wait, that's odd, like just zero, and that is a wonderful skill, one I wish I had. Um, but ultimately for any audience, it's really like it's a narrative. So back to marketing, right?
yeah.
Whether focused internally or externally.
So I think it's so cool that you are getting such exposure with the executive team and these data reviews and seeing firsthand what they care about. For the marketing operations people listening that don't have that kind of access, what would you really want them to take away and start putting into practice?
That's a great question. I think historically, at least as I have come up through it, my experience has been that the marketing ops discipline has been very tech and process oriented. So it's often like people that like, ooh, I can run Marketo or I can run Pardot or HubSpot or whatever. And so very business systemsy is the flavor. And often that can also mean like less business acumen, potentially even less interest in that. Sort of like that's marketing's problem. We're just going to figure out how to do what they ask us to do. And I understand being in that place. And if that's what you're interested in, that's fine. Like be conscious of that and choose that path. But if you're more of a marketing ops leader or someone who aspires to be one, I think you have to be plugged into the business side. You have to know your metrics. You should, if someone, pop quizzed you, like, how are we doing right now? You should be able to answer those questions and take that sort of accountability. I think you should view yourself and aspire to be kind of the second in command to your marketing leader, a thought partner, someone who's there, like kind of backing them up. Sort of the chief of staff to the CMO role that we've started to see more and more, which I think is super interesting, and to act that way, even though that's not your title. And then I think you'll get involved in more of those discussions. You will proactively add value. You'll be perceived as mature and business oriented and someone who's there for the business, not just to like run systems. And that is, I think, a huge boost to your career and just a change in your mindset too. Because even when it comes to your tech projects and the things that you choose to prioritize are going to be different if you have that awareness.
That was perfectly stated. That's amazing. And I think I'm so excited because I'm watching major market trends. I think marketing is becoming more and more critical to the business and the health and scale of the business just because of how buyer behavior has morphed over the years. I think customer success is also on the uptick. We've seen that with the whole land and expand mantra that all of us have had beaten into our heads. So we can't afford anymore to operate in a silo and ignore what the other departments need for everyone to work well together. I just, that's perfect.
It comes back to marketing also being perceived as a kind of mature and legitimate business function as well. Like there's a macrocosm of that where marketing needs to be really aligned with sales, to care about it, to work in lockstep with them. So those conversations are super important too.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think we can afford to ignore data anymore. And I don't think we can define what a qualified lead is in a silo anymore either.
And it's like, oh,
So
we hit our lead target. We're good. Like,
we
no,
haven't hit our pipeline number, doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah.
Justin, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we talk about where people can find you?
We talked about story and that's really important. The other thing that I think is worth thinking about are routines and rituals, because I think when you review the data is just as important as what you're reviewing. Having those regular meetings, those regular standing cadences is really important. It may seem like, oh, we can all look at these reports asynchronously, but you don't always do that. So having that forcing function where you know that you're gonna have to stand up in front of your peers or in front of executives and sort of account for yourself, uh, it focuses your mind in a positive way, in the sense that you're going to apply scrutiny in areas where you need. You're going to make sure you know. Uh, you're going to check in. Having this ritual kind of in my plate for a few months. I'm much closer with our DG team right now. Like, hey, why are we? I noticed we're down in this channel in this market. Like, why? Help me understand why, so I can speak to that. And that's great. That's really helpful for me. Or like the routines I mentioned with our BDR leaders, or just having those rituals, even for yourself, like a block time in my calendar each day to go and look through a set of key reports to make sure I'm there, and focusing your mind on the KPIs that matter for the business, I think is the most important thing you can do to drive more impact as a professional, because then everything else that you choose to do, that you prioritize, is going to be seen through that lens, as opposed to like shiny object. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, I'll buy this new tool. That's that sort of thing. So, yeah, if you implement one ritual, I think that is something that's really important.
That's so spot on, because I always say if you look at your numbers quarterly, it's too late. It is not a good story to the board to get the pipeline and bookings data at the end of the quarter and say, whoops, we missed everything. If you can say, we saw we were behind on pipeline and we responded by doing these 5 things, and you turned it around, at least to a degree, that is such a better story to tell your executive team. They trust that you understand the business more. It's wise. It's very wise. And then the other piece, I agree that it has to be a ritual that's done in public, by meeting, because recent research, and I'll link the research study in the show notes, 26% of marketers admit that they ignore the write-ups and insights that their analyst team sends out, and another 22% admitted to ignoring their recommendations and going by gut because that's what they prefer. So I think we're still in a very heavy intuitive marketing state still, or random acts of marketing. And I don't think that's going to be tolerated for much longer.
I agree with you. And actually, if we have time for one other fun thing, and tell me if we don't, but
No,
um,
absolutely.
AI, this is an interesting area. And I know I almost feel cringy saying AI because it's like AI, everything's AI right now. But I have thought a lot about like where can this actually help, and where can't it? And I did earlier in the year sort of a big review of like what are all the possible use cases, and where, and like you said, pattern matching is where I think AI can really, really help, because that's what it excels at. It doesn't excel at truly understanding human emotion or human psychology, even though it can sort of approximate it at times. But observing patterns and things, it's perfect. And so I only did a cursory review at that time of tools that are helping add sort of that analysis layer, that initial analysis layer, like, hey, you might want to look at this. This is up or this is down, or doing some of that analytical work for the human, being a co-pilot. And I see that as a really valid and promising use case for AI. I don't even know what's happened in the last 6 months. I haven't checked again, but I think that's an exciting possibility.
I am excited about that. And I am also really excited about the impacts and implications for qualitative data that is unstructured and normally we couldn't
Yes,
analyze. So for like sales call recordings and analyzing competitive
100%.
keywords, oh my gosh, it's going to be a game changer.
That is the area that I've been focused on the most, because I think, like you, I am, really obsessed with customer insights, and I think the qualitative is just as important, or if not more so. My one of my bosses, our COO, he's like, the quantitative tells you what happened, but the qualitative tells you why, and he probably listens to more calls than anybody else in the organization. And um and so being able to like mine that data, like have it as a corpus of information that AI can look through and be like, what are the most common pain points that are discussed? Gong doesn't really let you do this yet. Search across accounts, across all calls of a certain type. I'm sure they're going to get there. But even, I saw the other day a BDR, just of her own initiative, because it takes time. They have a discovery call, and then they have these 10 questions they need to answer. She developed a prompt and would just feed the transcript into ChatGPT, and it would spit the answers back out. Or
I love it.
wow, like we got to roll this out, to everybody somehow. Because and just seeing it work, I was like, oh, yep, this is the way it's going to happen.
It's all about time savings, and you have to use human oversight still. I mean, and I think we will for a very long time, but if you're not using it now to figure out productivity gains, you're going to be so behind everybody else in the market. And I just love that context truly is everything. And I think marketing operators can learn more from marketing by lifting their heads up every once in a while and reading the room and talking to the executive team. And I think marketers can learn from operators by taking some time to look at the numbers and seeing how that ties into the context. I think there's just a lot we can gain from one another.
100%.
Justin, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always a pleasure to geek out with you over this
Likewise.
stuff.
Always enjoy it.
Thank you. Where can people find you online to network?
Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search my name. I'll pop up. And if you're interested in the show, it's called RevOps FM. 2 words. You can find it on wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or go to revops.fm/subscribe. That'll take you to my Substack, and I post all the episodes there as well.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Revenue Marketing Report. Please tell 2 friends, subscribe, download, whatever you can helps. And for those of you looking for more great content like this, check out caliberbuying.com.